Hey everyone, welcome and welcome back here to my channel where I play PineHut Zoo. My name is Nissa and today we're gonna continue here in PineHut Zoo. Just to mention, this is still pre-recorded, not the voiceover which I record now, but the entire build along with any footage you get here, cinematics and aftershots and all of that. That's pre-recorded because the zoo did crash with the new update and the new DLC. Therefore, I luckily did record the entire zoo along with what's it called, the final zoo tour. But this also means that everything you're gonna see in PineHut Zoo will be pre-recorded. And I won't use any of the things we got with the newest DLC. So just to make sure that I don't disappoint anyone that really want to see the newest, latest stuff. However, I still think that I built something good here, so I would encourage you to keep watching. Especially because I like to tell myself that you aren't only here for the speed build. I like to tell myself that you really love my speed build, but you're also here to hear what I have to say. I at least like to pretend it's like that. So yeah, we're gonna go with that. And today I have a quite unique story that I actually never heard about, and I don't think you have either. Of course, some people out there will be very knowledgeable about a lot of these stuff. But I never heard about all of this before. But the thing is, today we're gonna build it by a house. Yeah, sorry, I know that seems like I turned on a plate there, but it will have something to do with it, I swear. But today we're building a bear house. It's not only for bears, but we're gonna call it that because today we're gonna build for two bears, which is the Himalayan Brown Bear and the Formosan Black Bear. But I have built for these before. I've told you about these before, so therefore I wanted to tell you something new. This was originally the idea of the history about the first bears in captivity and how they arrived in captivity. Was it zoos, where something else, or what it was? I couldn't really find anything about it. I really wanted to tell you that story, but I couldn't. But what I could find was the history of zoos and where they come from. And I promise you there will be a twist about a bear. But we're gonna get to that. But it's just, maybe you don't think this voiceover matched the footage all that much. But it's just to explain that when I found this story, I just really wanted to tell you. So that's what we're gonna dive into today. Before that, I just want to mention about the build here. I tried to make this, again, this zoo, PineHut Zoo, is very much like the mismatch of what we used to do in zoos and what we do with zoos today. So therefore, I feel like this is a very good idea because these houses were most of what I remember about zoos when I grew up. So therefore, it would make so much sense to use it in here. But the outdoor habitats should be more like custom to the animal, but a lot of animals in zoos back then, and I'm only from this beginning of the 90s, so it's not that long ago, but a lot of animals all just had the same habitat copied over, and you can still see that in a lot of zoos where they have tried with toys and enrichment to make them more customized, but they still have the same building and they can't afford to swap up every single building every day. So that's what we go with here. My initial idea about this building was that it should be a walkthrough building, so we would continue the zoo on the other side of the building. But because I was in a time crunch, I decided to end the zoo here. So this building will inhabit the last 4 habitats we're gonna build for this. And then of course we will have 2 outdoors on one side and 2 outdoors on the other. But it's just a little bit of the building. I will jump in later to tell you a little more of the bear habitats, but that's the idea about the building itself. But to tell you about this entire story of the zoos around the world, I will mention that I found this amazing site called Noah's Ark Zoo Farm, in one word, co.uk. It will be linked in the description below, of course. But they have this really good article, so I'm gonna use that primarily, and I will mention when I have done some research besides that. But it's small things, so I don't feel like anyone will feel like they miss out on anything today. But yeah, let's talk about it. And we're gonna start 3,000 years ago. And as we do with a lot of that old stuff, I think a lot of people wonder, like, who did start all of this? And we are starting in ancient Egypt, where the pharaohs were mostly famous today about all of these beautiful animal related stuff. Like a lot of their gods looks like animal, and animals were very precious. And I'm sorry, I'm not that informed about the old Egyptian gods, but I am aware that a lot of them had these, like a crocodile face, wolf face, and so on. So it's clear, and also on a lot of hieroglyphs and a lot of stuff we find from the ancient Egypt, that animals was a big part. Cleopatra was also kind of famous for her beautiful cheetahs that she would feed men too. And already here I'm off scripts, because the part about Cleopatra isn't something I have from this website, but it's something I have seen and heard in different documentaries over the time. I can't remember which, and again, I honestly don't want to make that much research for it, so I don't have documentary for that. But I will mention that at least the story of it is quite amazing, and you can decide what you choose to believe here. But the pharaohs used the animals around their pretty much where they live, because that was what they have the knowledge about, but also other animals if they learned about them, to be a status symbol, kind of like a few years ago when every famous people in the world needed a tiny dog, purse dog, because everyone had them. So it was kind of simple of that you are keeping up with the time, and you have this animal that's a proof of that. The same way, the animals could be a symbol both of the wealth and power, and how modern for the time these pharaohs were. So they would basically just order the animals, like see a picture of an animal, for instance, or being told about an animals, and then they could be like, go get that, I want that. And then of course it was another time, remember, so when the pharaoh said that he wanted something, he would get it without issues. So therefore it was a proof of his power over the people, that when he wanted something they would get it right away. Once again, this wouldn't exactly be like zoos, since that would be like zoos are thought of like these public displays, where the pharaohs were more private in that way. So the animals would be either in the, is it castles they live in, or what's they called? You know what I mean, hopefully. So they would have that, and it could both be to put the fear into people, or just to show them up and see, hey, I got a peafowl, what do you have? So yeah. And I think we also have seen a lot of this in modern interpretations in television, and latest I remember in Catherine the Great, where they have a crocodile suddenly that everyone thinks is a dragon, and this kind of stuff. So it's have been involved into people's consciousness over time in one way or another. And this thing about the pharaohs wanting to have animals, of course, over time was more like a fashion symbol for every pharaoh, king, emperor, and so on. But we need to travel all the way up to 15th century before we actually see the first signs of zoos, like real public zoos you could go and pay to see animals in. But here I just needed to do my own research. Because if zoos was the modern thing to do back in the 1500, how long would it actually take my country, Denmark, to keep up with the modern times and get a zoo? And it's embarrassing. The first zoo in Denmark were the Copenhagen Zoo, in our capital zoo, and it was 1859 we got that. And the next zoo in Denmark didn't open before 1930, which actually was Odense Zoo. If you think you may heard about Odense before but can't really picture it, think Hans Christian Andersen, which is the author of The Little Mermaid, Ugly Duckling, and for instance The Ice Queen, which I know in modern fairy tales have been very, very up in the times. And Odense is basically the heart of Denmark, the middle of Denmark, and that's where he was born and where he grew up. It was, however, one of the smallest zoos in Europe for many years. Not anymore, but they hold that title for some time. And maybe it's a good thing that Denmark wasn't that up in times and got the first zoos in the world, because originally the idea of zoos wasn't anything about welfare for the animals or conservation or anything like that. It was more like, look at this. Back in that time, it was very much from God, king, and country, and that was the only thing that matters. So therefore, a lot of the old zoos, it was explorers exploring the world for their king and queen to just basically kidnap a lot of animals in the wild and bring them home as kind of like pretty things, like when they brought on home spices from China, or they brought home other things from around the world. These animals would just be things that they could look at that could be pretty, and therefore it was really a status symbol for a lot of countries, but still with these underlying tones that these aren't really anything we should care about. Again, animals overall wasn't something you cared about back then. And just to clarify, I don't laugh because I find it funny. I laugh because I find it extremely uncomfortable to think about how we treated animals. So these zoos was originally boxes, like showrooms, like something you would put a car in today. Just a room, 4 walls, what it need to survive being bad food and water, basically. And then 4 walls where the guests could go all around and look at it for a lot of different angles, and it was all about the guests paying to see these animals, nothing else. One of the oldest zoos histories is actually London Zoo. I'm just mentioning because I know you come from a lot of places in the world. London is the capital of England. And their zoo have this quite unique history, because you could actually see both polar bears, elephant, monkeys, lions, and bamboos, and so on quite early in London. Not in a zoo like a zoo, but more like a showroom the king had in the Tower of London. So they wasn't even able to go outside. They would be in the Bloody Tower. At the same time, this started all the way back to Henry VIII, that in 1251 was gifted a white bear. It isn't classified as a polar bear. I found some places where they say polar bear, but other places they say white bear, and maybe because Henry VIII and other English people didn't know about polar bears back then, so it was just a weird whiter bear. So it's really a big status symbol for the king back then, and that was the first animal that he acquired, and he was so proud of it, so he built these spaces in the Tower of London. And this was not only something that he wanted to get, it was actually a gift. And from who? Well, not from Denmark, but from our cousins in Norway. And it was a gift from the Norwegian king. I couldn't figure out who. I did a little bit of research, and I don't research for hours, to be honest. But I did a little bit and I couldn't figure out the name. But it was in 1251. So if anyone know who the Norwegian king was at that point, comment section below, please. But these animals lived in the Tower of London for more than 600 years. And for instance, King John, who really liked the lions, and a lot of us think about lions as royalty nowadays, and they may came from here. And King John was so proud of his lions, so he actually named a building Lion Tower. And since then, the lions have actually been a part of the English royal identity over time, which is kind of weird when you think about it, because lions don't belong in England, but I can see why a king owning a lion would kind of think that. So this party went on for about 600 years, and then you reach the point where people started to recognize how dangerous these animals could be, and a tower wasn't exactly built for these animals because you didn't know back then how to build for it. So I guess this cost a lot of life around the tower. So they decided to actually split up the animals at this point. And this was around 1820, where the Tower of London was closed for animals, and the animals were split up into three. So some of them were sent to the Regent Park, which later became London Zoo. Some of them were shipped to America, and some of them were sold to circuses. So again, I'm not sure where the bears went and if they even died out before this, because that's also a possibility, because 600 years, some of the animals may die and they got something new, so that's a possibility. But the idea that, oh, this is an issue to have these animals, so we're gonna put some into a park, some we're gonna ship about one of the biggest oceans at that known at that time, and some of them we're gonna sell from a king to a circus. This is so weird to think about. I understand the situation. I understand that if they killed people working around the tower, that wasn't very smart to have them around them. But I feel like you could have made a better solution if you knew anything that we know today. Again, always remember, when we talk about people back then, they didn't have the knowledge we have today. And when I, as a Danish person, look at England here and think that was bad, like, you should have done better, remember that we haven't even gotten our first zoo at this point before 39 years later than this. So we really couldn't say that much smarter than they could back then. But before we start to look on when things started to change for these animals, I just want to tell you a little bit about their habitats. I know you have seen most of it at this point, but as you can see, I really want this illusion that, again, they started to live inside the house and that was all they had, and then later on you have to build out, and that's also why you have this kind of weird way to get the Formosan Black Bear over in the outdoor habitat, because you didn't think of that back when you built the building. So therefore I just think that's quite a unique part of the story here, and I really like that kind of oval walk that they have there. It's not intended for the guest at all, but you can still see the top of the fence, even though it's not, you're not supposed to look at it, which I feel like a lot of zoos does. Like, they try to cover things up like fences and so, but they don't really manage it. Both of the habitats also have electrical fence. They have glass at the water area to make sure they don't splash the guest. But besides that, it is electrical. I think it's a grade 6 fence. And then for get closer to the guest, we're gonna add a second fence that are gonna protect the guests so they don't get their fingers stuck in an electrical fence, because Even though I grew up here, where on the way home from the school there were multiple electrical fence because we live near fields and farm animals and so. But I have seen both my. Okay, I've been a part of testing who could touch the electrical fence the longest, and I also seen guys pee on it on purpose, and yeah, stupid kids we were, but just to make sure that that doesn't happen here, especially because this fence would have more voltage than a normal, like, for sheep fence or something like that, of course. So we want to make sure. That's also why I built this far away from the path, to make sure that the guests are gonna both stay on the other side of fence number 2, but they can't reach it from over there even if they try. I don't want them to try, but if they do, we have that second barrier there. But let's get into the rest of the story. And this is finally when the story of the zoo started to have a positive effect on the world. But this wasn't before after World War II. So we need to get a long time past a lot of the timeline here to get up to that point. But at this point, conservation started to become an issue. Because earlier, like breeding, that was something you did if you didn't want to pay anything to go out and capture a new animal. Before that, it was completely legal in a lot of countries. Like, we missing a lion, then let's go to Africa and find a lion. No issues here. We also did start to research this because it's easier to figure out why they won't breed if we actually know a lot more about them. So they put up research centers not only in zoos but also like related to zoos. And at the same time, they also hired a lot of educational staff. Again, this was a rolling effect, so it wasn't like now we're all doing this. For some countries, this took a long time, and some countries actually isn't quite there yet. But this rolling bolt of we need to do something because the numbers in the wild are swindling for a lot of animals, so we can't just keep going out there to find them. Before this, people had an idea like everything in nature was forever, like oil, for instance, because that will never run out, right? And at some point, you start to figure out, when you start to research animals and teach other people about how they actually live in the wild, someone stops up and thinks, well, they don't live like that here. So maybe if we give them better places to live, they would be happier and they would breed more, and we could help the world with all of these animals that disappears from the world. So they started to renovate and make bigger habitats, both bigger, but also we gotta put the animals like outside and not only with 4 walls where everyone can peek through. Maybe you need something behind so the guests don't go all the way around the animals, so they can get some peace and quiet. All of these kinds of things started after World War II. But then why do I still remember these 4 walls, habitat closed off, inside without any fresh air or anything like that? In the 90s, this is basically a budget problem, because you couldn't just wake up as a zoo one day and say, oh, our guests need to pay like $1,000 to get in here so we can afford it. And you couldn't tell the builders, well, it's for the animals, it's not for us, it's for the animals, so we can't pay. So therefore, this was a massive change in how you run a zoo, and therefore it also needed a lot of change in a lot of other ways so you could afford that. So a lot of zoos went into this with, we're gonna start a place, because you can't renovate anything, everything. So therefore this was a project that took time, and some zoos aren't there yet, but they are going there. A lot of the zoos are going the right way, And today, a lot of zoos are the front runners when it comes to helping animals around the world. Does this excuse all of those animals living in cruelty for so many years? Again, we all even talk thousands of years since the ancient Egypt. So, does that actually make it any better? Well, I think it does. It does make it better. It won't go back and save all of those poor animals that live that way. But I do believe that a lot of zoos today try to do the best they can. And I do believe that if we want to help these animals in the future, breeding programs, zoos, research centers, and so on is the right way to go. So therefore, I still think, even though this is a cruel story, we need to help zoos in the future. And sorry, that's my opinion. I'm so sorry if I turned you off to zoos from now on, but that's my thought about all of this. I think it's an important story. I'm kind of hurt that I never heard this before because it's an important story, and we owe all of these animals to do so much better in the future. Okay guys, that was it, and yeah, as you probably noticed, we are almost done here in PineHut Zoo. I didn't think I got to finish the zoo. I made it a little more smaller than I actually intended. As you know, if you follow my channel, I normally don't make these cutie small zoos, but we have to do what we have to do. Only missing two last habitats, which are going to be on the other side of this building. So therefore, I am really intrigued to say I already built that. So therefore, it's gonna be fine. We gotta have time for everything. We gotta finish everything in the zoo, and I already recorded a final zoo tour. So again, not sure when it's gonna be, but it's gonna be. So I'm so happy. And you know the drill, guys. Like, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification so you know the next time I upload a video. I really hope to see you again. Add in the comments below or in the next video. Bye guys!